Welcome to this deep dive. First, I will set the stage. Securing residency quickly in the UAE for an entire family, especially when relocating due to conflict and without senior-level employment, is challenging and expensive. The system is built for temporary, employment-based stays rather than permanent migration or asylum. Next, we will outline the core options, critical timelines, and financial realities. Then compare the UAE with alternative destinations that may offer clearer paths to permanence. Finally, stay to the end for risk alerts, a structured action plan, and a practical summary. Here is today's agenda. First, we frame the challenge and timeline pressures. Then, we cover the 19-plus applicants' options. After that, we confront the parental sponsorship and investment realities. Next, we visualize the process with diagrams and timelines. Then we examine alternatives to the UAE. Finally, we end with risk alerts, a summary, and practical next steps. The context is simple but sobering. The UAE residency regime is oriented toward temporary, employment-based stays. For families seeking refuge, especially across generations, achieving self-sponsorship is complex and often cost-prohibitive. Meanwhile, time pressure on tourist visas makes immediate action essential, because overstays trigger penalties. As we proceed, we will unpack these pieces and how they interact. Let's explore the timeline. First, tourist visas are short and unforgiving. Overstay penalties accumulate quickly. Second, the usual pathway transitions from a tourist visa to an entry permit, followed by a status change, medical screening, and biometrics. Then Emirates ID issuance and visa stamping. Third, you must have a sponsor, whether an employer, a free zone authority, or your own investment setup. Fourth, being document ready is critical. Valid passports, attested education certificates where relevant, no objection letters where needed, bank statements, and signed contracts. Finally, expect to schedule and attend medical screening and biometrics appointments before you receive your Emirates ID. For the 19-plus applicant, the first decision is which path to choose, freelance or employment. If freelance, select a free zone aligned to your activity and apply for a permit. Prepare evidence of qualifications and income, especially if you are a digital content creator or service provider. If employment, secure a firm job offer from a mainland or free zone employer that will act as your sponsor. After sponsorship is established, you apply for the entry permit. Complete the status change either in-country or via a short exit and re-entry. Then complete medical exams and biometrics. Once the visa is stamped and an Emirates ID is issued, review whether any dependent sponsorship is possible under current rules. Comparing the 19-plus routes, a freelance path offers control and suits online income sources, but requires free zone permits, compliance, and proof of earnings or qualifications. There are setup and renewal costs. By contrast, employment visas can be faster if a job offer is already available. The employer manages much of the procedure, but you are dependent on the job market and the specific role. Mobility and activity are more constrained. Contract terms are crucial for long-term stability. Moving forward, we will address the parental sponsorship challenge. This flowchart starts at the tourist visa stage and asks whether a sponsor is available. If an employer is available, the path proceeds through the employment entry permit, status change, medical checks, and biometrics, then to Emirates ID issuance and resident status. If a free zone freelance setup is chosen, it proceeds through the freelance permit, then the entry permit, status change, medicals and biometrics, and Emirates ID. If no sponsor is available, the diagram highlights overstay penalties and advises considering alternatives or exiting before penalties accrue. Documentation readiness and time sensitivity are emphasized as accelerators. For non-working parents, a dependent child usually cannot sponsor them. Parents will need to self-sponsor. The real estate investor route generally requires property purchases from roughly 750,000 to 2 million dirhams or more, depending on the emirate and the duration of stay sought. The Golden Visa offers 5 to 10 years, but typically requires investments starting at 2 million dirhams or more, via real estate or other qualifying investments. There is no cheap long-term residency option for non-working, non-retired foreign nationals. Furthermore, obtaining citizenship is extremely rare for foreigners, and permanent integration is limited. Next, we will quantify typical costs and timelines. This table summarizes indicative figures. Freelance paths require free zone setup and ongoing fees, with visas often valid for 1 or 2 years. Employment visas may process faster if a job offer exists. The visa duration is generally 1 to 2 years. The real estate investor route usually requires property in the range of 750,000 to 2 million dirhams or more, with processing timelines of 2 to 8 weeks, depending on documentation and emirate. Golden visas typically require investments from 2 million dirhams upward, yielding 5 to 10 years of residency with similar processing timelines. These figures are subject to change by policy and by emirate, and exact costs vary. This pie chart displays a typical cost distribution for investment-based residency routes. The largest portion is the property value itself, often around 90% of total outlay. Government and free zone fees can comprise several percent. Medical examinations and Emirates ID issuance make up a small share. Legal and translation services account for a modest portion, and a contingency buffer is prudent for unexpected expenses. Actual percentages will vary by emirate and transaction specifics. Question: can a 19-year-old new resident typically sponsor their non-working parents for UAE residency? Options are A. Yes, as long as they have an Emirates ID. B. Yes, if they earn any income. C. Generally no, parents must self-sponsor via qualifying routes. D. Only if on a tourist visa. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is C. Generally, a dependent child cannot sponsor their non-working parents. Parents typically need to self-sponsor through qualifying investment routes, most commonly via real estate or the golden visa categories. Now, let us continue with a practical timeline plan. This timeline outlines a pragmatic 60-day window. Initially, gather documents and choose a strategy. Next, engage a sponsor by securing a job offer or applying for a free zone permit. Then, obtain the entry permit and complete the status change. Following that, schedule and complete medicals and biometrics. Afterward, look for visa stamping and Emirates ID issuance. Finally, begin family planning steps, including property research if pursuing investment, or exploring alternatives if costs prove prohibitive. Key risk alerts. First, overstay penalties accumulate rapidly. Second, ensure your chosen free zone aligns with your actual activity to avoid rejection. Third, verify current residency rules and property eligibility before committing funds. Fourth, avoid unlicensed intermediaries and work only with authorized providers. Fifth, do not expect citizenship. Plan for renewals and temporary status. Next, we will map strategic choices, including alternatives to the UAE. This mind map centers on a family residency strategy. One branch explores UAE options: employment, freelance via a free zone, investor routes, and the golden visa, alongside constraints such as high costs and limited pathways to citizenship. Another branch addresses alternatives, including Latin American countries with visa-free entry and clearer progression from residency to citizenship, as well as certain European options like digital nomad or student permits. A timing branch emphasizes avoiding overstays and running parallel applications to manage risk. It is worth asking whether the UAE is the optimal refuge for long-term stability. Across the GCC, citizenship is rarely granted, and permanent residency is limited. By contrast, several Latin American countries may allow visa-free entry and offer more accessible residency to citizenship pathways at lower cost. Certain European options, such as student permits or digital nomad visas, can also provide clearer rules and long-term tracks. A prudent strategy is to secure immediate safety while simultaneously pursuing jurisdictions that offer a real route to permanence, using existing passport privileges where possible. Next, we compare UAE and alternative destinations directly. The UAE offers fast processing, top-tier infrastructure, and safety, but requires either employer sponsorship or significant capital. With limited long-term permanence, alternatives may have lower costs and clearer residency to citizenship pathways, along with greater integration potential and social benefits, though processing times and requirements vary. Some countries may require language proficiency or sustained local presence. With this context, let us test your knowledge again. Question: what is a commonly cited minimum investment threshold for a UAE Golden Visa via real estate or qualifying investments? Options are A. AED 200,000, B. AED 2 million, C. AED 20,000, D. No investment required. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B. Golden visa thresholds commonly start at around 2 million dirhams, subject to variations by emirate and specific category. Now, let us visualize status transitions and compliance risks. This state diagram shows the journey from tourist status to resident status. The path moves from tourist to entry permit pending, then to status changed, followed by medical and biometrics, and finally to resident with an Emirates ID. A side branch warns that remaining a tourist beyond the permitted stay leads to overstay penalties. After reaching resident status, a renewal state appears, indicating the need to maintain valid sponsorship and documentation for subsequent cycles. This representation emphasizes compliance checkpoints and renewal obligations. This content is educational and does not constitute legal, immigration, or financial advice. Rules, thresholds, and processing times change frequently across emirates and authorities. Always verify requirements directly with government portals and engage licensed advisors before committing funds or initiating applications. Now, let us consolidate the key takeaways. In summary, moving from tourist to resident status requires speed, sponsorship, and complete documentation. For the 19-plus applicant, freelance and employment routes are the most practical starting points. Parents usually need self-sponsorship through significant investment. Golden visas and investor visas demand substantial capital and ongoing compliance. Consider jurisdictions with clearer pathways to permanence and potentially lower costs, especially under time pressure. Always engage licensed advisors and avoid overstay penalties. Thank you for watching. If you found this valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. Share your questions and experiences in the comments so others can learn from your journey. See you in the next video.